Welcome back. The National Planning Commission and Unicef South Africa today launched a joint report titled Trends in the Cost of Living in South Africa. The report reveals a troubling trend. Between 2011 and 2023, the rise in costs of essential services like electricity, transport and food have significantly outpaced wage growth, placing increasing financial strain on households, especially the poorest. The findings highlight the disproportionate impact on low-income families who continue to face greater challenges in meeting basic needs. To discuss these findings and what they mean for the future, I'm joined by NPC Commissioner, Professor Phakama Ntshongwana. Professor Ntshongwana, thank you so much for your time and joining us this evening. If you could tell us a little bit more about this joint report and these findings.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for having me. Yes, this is quite an important report, especially for the National Planning Commission, because it comes at a time when the medium-term development plan, NDP 2030 is around the corner, and we're beginning to look at a National Development Plan 2050. And so this report is very important for planning purposes, for informing policies with evidence. And the partnership with the United Nations Children's Fund is very important, because at the center of our planning as the Commission, we always ask, what do the plans mean for children as we look to the future? So the different domains that have been researched for this report are critical in informing policy, because they affect millions and millions of people in the country.
Yes, and Professor, as you mentioned as well, the focus on children too, and one of the findings in this joint report was the value of secondary education in the labour market that had diminished. If our education prospects are diminishing and looking poorer as well, what does that mean for the NDP and planning purposes as well?
Yes, it's very challenging, because even the report demonstrates that most income in South Africa is drawn from labour market participation. And then second comes this social grants, income being drawn from social grants. And with the challenges that we have in both secondary and tertiary education, and really just aligning education with what the labour market needs is challenging in itself. So I think that we have had some focus in the National Planning Commission in trying to look at articulation from secondary education, tertiary education, and then into the labour market, and what advisory we can have on that. But yes, certainly these are part of the challenges, and certainly with the high cost of living in relation to the most basic of services, in relation to housing, access to education, and access to good, sound health care. All of these domains intersect, and at the end of the day depict the quality of lives of people, especially on the lower income end of the income distribution. With that said, the report does demonstrate that there has been improvement in income, especially for those on the lower end, in terms of wages. But you know, it does not mean that there aren't concerns there, of course, such as the type of work people have, conditions under which people work. Is it decent work, decent wages? And those remain concerns.
And with those concerns as well, I mean, South Africans are just financially drowning. Taking a look at this, and I know you mentioned some progress as well, but the entire picture is seemingly quite more dire. How far are we from reaching key objectives of the NDP realistically, especially with the backdrop of such reports?
Well, I wish I could give a more positive report or response on that. Unfortunately, challenges do still stand. I mean, the NDP was drawn in 2012, but we are not much closer to the goals of the NDP. There are pockets of improvement, but much remains to be done in terms of policy delivery and in terms of improving the quality of lives of children, women, and our society in general. I think that challenges that remain intact, such as the spatial patterns in the country, become very strong impediments to improving the quality of lives of people. This report certainly shows that with spatial patterning and low-income people living so far away from economic hubs where they can actually access a job, then comes the question of their work-seeking strategies, with transport costs playing a huge role for these people to access jobs. And of course, households with employed members fare better than households without employed members. And also, the report also shows that households with children are worse off than households without children. That in itself is concerning and is an entire conversation in itself.
Yeah, it totally is. And also, when you're speaking about the spatial planning, the apartheid spatial planning in particular as well, and those who are seeking employment opportunities, having to spend a lot of money on transport as well. This apartheid spatial planning is something that government has spoken about eradicating for decades now. When we talk about unemployment as well being a big contributor to the state that we find ourselves in, this unemployment statistics aren't improving. So ultimately, and you also mentioned policy delivery or lack thereof of policy delivery. Who should South Africans be blaming for these failures and these challenges that we're mentioning?
I mean, perhaps, yeah. I mean, part of the challenge is with the different spheres of government, national, provincial, and local, and these at times not speaking to each other, and that going as far as impeding policy delivery. So that's certainly one of the challenges that we do have. I mean, there has been efforts from government in terms of township economies, efforts there, trying to improve those and economic activity there, but it's not enough. And of course, as you said, with the spatial planning that has been ongoing and little changing there. I think that we really need to take the social wage within the country much more seriously, as people accessing basic services that are free are becoming less, at least according to this report. And that ought not to be the case, considering the high rate of inequality in the country and the high rates of poverty, especially due to unemployment. So, I mean, previously, the work done has had recommendations that social security provision, in particular social assistance, ought to be directly linked to work activation programs. And with digital transformation, I think this is becoming more and more possible. So whether the political will is there and what then happens with that type of advancement in digitization remains to be seen.
Professor Ntshongwana, thank you so much for sharing what is obviously quite a bleak but sobering report that is a true reflection of our reality today. Really appreciate your time.